Before this video begins, I was hacked recently and lost control of my channel, causing a lot of people to unsubscribe as the hacker streamed a crypto scam. Please take 2 seconds to check if you're actually subscribed and enjoy the video. To start things off, we begin at Christmas Day. After spending time with my family, I had free time to play the Pauper Challenge. This is a high-stake event where top 8 gets really good prizes. I wasn't planning on recording the event, but after starting 5-1, I was locked for the top 8 spot, so I turned on the recording. And in this video, you will watch me use a $20 deck to win $300. Before you can get any good tournament result, you must start off with a good deck. This Mardu Synthesizer deck is all about card advantage. Start the game off with indestructible artifact lands to either use Cleansing Wildfire to ramp on the early game to get a basic and draw a card, or use artifacts that draw cards so that we can bounce them with one of our 2 flyers. Alongside this game plan, our deck is full of interaction and removal to slow down the opponent as we try to drown them out in card advantage. I love this deck as it has the perfect balance between mid-range and control, so games go at all types of speeds. But now it's time to watch the quarterfinals. To start the quarterfinals, we're on the play and I decide to keep a medium hand because I played against this opponent in the Swiss and they're on red-black burn. The opponent tanks for a while for their opening hand but decide to keep, and we lead with a red source and say go. The opponent starts off like a normal red-black burn plan by playing Vidalian Epicure. For those who don't know the list, it's a burn deck with a load of madness bolts in the deck and ways to get card advantage while bolting out the opponent so that you can get fast kills without running out of cards. If you didn't know, I actually top 8'd a previous Pauper Challenge which is on my YouTube channel to watch as well with this deck. As every point of damage matters against burn, I'm playing my tap land and will bolt the Vidalian Epicure now because some decks play Deadly Dispute. But the opponent just untaps, casts a Faithless Looting, and another Epicure. Not drawing a land here is really rough as I want to hit all of my land drops against this deck, so I decide that what I'm going to do is play the Glint Hawk, bounce one of my lands, and replay them so that I can have Deadly Dispute on a follow-up turn, potentially even in response to a removal spell if this Hawk stays around. I also have access to Galvanic Blast if I need to use it on their turn. The opponent doesn't really do much and just ships the turn back, so I decide to Galvanic Blast the Epicure to get rid of it now. With this deck, when you're mana screwed, it's very important to be as mana efficient as possible, especially when all the other cards in my hand are 2 mana and I was stuck on 2 lands at the time. I decide not to attack with my 2/2 because they do play Kinchin Imp, which is a 2/2 flying haste that has madness for 1 black. However, they don't seem to have it because they use Alms of the Vein, which is essentially a lightning helix for 1 black. On the end step, we follow it with our plan, Deadly Dispute our creature, and we manage to find a Navigator's Compass, which will gain us life. Compass is really good in this matchup because obviously it gains 3 life when it enters the battlefield, but also we can bounce it with one of our birds to gain even more down the line. The opponent just flashes back one of their Faithless Lootings and discards 2 madness spells, but they can only cast 1, and that's going to be a Kitchen Imp. We're at a very healthy life total at 16 here, but the opponent has 4 unknowns and a land in hand, which is a problem even though we can keep the board clear. Now I want to highlight something. Look in the top left hand corner of the screen, that is their time on the clock. Now let me edit to how long they tank on their upkeep. Okay, only 3-4 minutes, not too bad, but as an editing standpoint, it will get much worse very quickly. Just, this match is about to be very confusing. The opponent uses 3 mana, and they use a Vampire's Kiss and just ship back the turn. Then I draw Suffocating Fumes, obviously that's not a great card here, so let's cycle, and the opponent goes deep into the tank again. As we top deck the Skyfisher, we can bounce the Compass and gain 3 more life. And as I really can't be bothered to edit out these 1 to 2 to 3 minute pauses, watch their clock to now. For those who aren't too experienced with Magic Online, I'll explain what's going on here. I've used just over 2.5 minutes of my chess clock and the opponent has used almost 15. And yeah, it's just a bit awkward. I mean, it's fair play. You can walk away from your computer at any time you'd like, but you would expect with a quarterfinals event, you would, I don't know, put more time into it. Who knows? With a lightning bolt off the top, though, and no way to bounce my Navigator's Compass, we're most likely dead when they untap with 3 cards in hand. The opponent then tanks another 3 minutes, going down to 7. Don't forget this is game 1, and they chain lightning my face and just pass the turn. Like a beast, we rip Synthesizer off the top, so we have to cast our cantrip to try and gain some life, or at least put pressure on the board, and we find a Cleansing Wildfire. We target the indestructible land so it doesn't get destroyed and we get a basic land out of our deck, and we find another Synthesizer, giving us another shot at another Compass or a way to bounce it. We find an Inker Wellspring, that's not good enough, so I'm going to sack the Synthesizer to the makeshift munitions so that we draw another card, which finds us a Bojuka Bog. I decided to just play the Bojuka Bog and play the Inker Wellspring and pray. We did find a core Skyfisher, but that doesn't matter because we didn't have enough mana to bounce the compass and recast it if we sacked the synthesizer. Santa Claus didn't give me charcoal for Christmas, and that's why the opponent just ships back the turn with no burn spell, and we can now bounce our Navigator's Compass. Now we can just go off. Deadly Dispute plus Inker Wellspring is actually Ancestral Recall because of the treasure. You pay 2 mana, get a treasure, sack the Inker Wellspring, draw a card, then draw 2 cards from the Deadly Dispute. 3 cards and a treasure for 2 mana, that's Recall, and the opponent just casts a Lightning Bolt and can't do anything. I think the funniest part of this whole thing is that they salt in the chat and say lol. I mean, if you're going to use your clock down to less than 7 minutes, you probably want to play quickly and not assume that you've won the game. I don't know, I just thought that was a really hilarious salt by the opponent when, I've only used about 6 minutes of my time. But yeah, we Galvanic Blast the face, pass back, start attacking, this game is over. I'm going to finish off this match by just showing the end of it. The opponent kind of gave up because they had less than 7 minutes on the clock to win 2 games. So yeah, they just clocked themselves out, and that's us winning the quarterfinals. I think this is the most awkward and weirdest quarterfinals I have ever played in the history of Magic, and I guess you guys got to share that with me. Going into the semi-finals, something different with Magic Online is that typically in paper tournaments, the top seed gets to go on the play. Well, on Magic Online, it's not programmed to do that, so you have to win the die roll, which is what we did. So we get to land go to set up a Cleansing Wildfire next turn. The opponent starts off with an island and a Fairy Seer. This instantly implies that it's Blue-Red Delver, Blue-Red Fairies, whatever you like to call the deck, which is a control deck, which we're actually really favored against because we're a deck full of card draw and removal spells. So what we need to prioritize is to keep the board clear and to also play around counters. The opponent ninjutsus the Fairy though, draws a card, and plays the Fairy again. As they're tapped out, I want to get at least 1 creature on the board, so I decide to play the Compass, bounce the Compass, and hold up Lightning Bolt. The opponent just untaps, casts a few creatures, and chips back the turn, which is exactly where we want to be, as we want them to not hold up counterspells so that we can do whatever we'd like. Because I think I'm going to tap out next turn, I decide to Lightning Bolt one of their creatures, just as a heads up play. Drawing a tap land is nice, now we can just get some card advantage. Let's draw a card with Inker Wellspring, then play another core Skyfisher and bounce the Inker Wellspring and play our tap land. The opponent continues to durdle and this time cantrips and plays a couple creatures and then passes back the turn again, and we find a Cleansing Wildfire. You know the game plan of this deck right now, we're just going to draw a load of cards, get card advantage, and try and look for removal spells as that's what we need right now on a very wide board. The opponent then untaps, cycles an Ash Barrens to get a mountain, and attacks him with 3 creatures, meaning that they have a ninjutsu, and they do, drawing them a card and bouncing the Augur of Bolas to hand, giving them a lot of value, and they also have 2 blue up for that counterspell that they revealed earlier on in the game. We do find a Deadly Dispute, and as we discussed earlier in this video, is Ancestral Recall if you can sacrifice an Inker Wellspring. Finding a Synthesizer off the top though is perfect because now we can use that to bait a counterspell as the opponent will know what deck we're on, and we even found a second one to follow up with after they use the counterspell. What I just displayed here is just an important general skill for any format. You can really try to bait your opponent to cast a counterspell if you do have a better spell or combo in your hand that they don't really know of. Our Synthesizer finishes off the turn by finding us the 1 of Boros Garrison to get us more value. Now things start to go downhill when they preordain and just pass the turn, so we decide to cast 2 spells, and yeah, they have a counterspell for both of them. To make things even worse, they get to scred one of our creatures and attack in. I have to block the Spellstarter sprite because of ninjutsu, and we do get slightly rewarded, but they still get to draw a card and loot. We find a Journey to Nowhere off the top, which is not too bad because we can remove one of their creatures, but with 2 blue up, they are heavily implying counterspell, which I just have to hope they don't have. Unfortunately though, they do have the Spellstarter sprite to blow up my Lightning Bolt, so now I have to hope that these 2 creatures can hold down the fort. The next 2 turns is just absolute blowout. We top deck a Lightning Bolt, they have the counterspell for it. I mean, things are just not looking good until we rip an Inker Wellspring off the top. Now as the luck sack we are, we top deck Deadly Dispute, which is Ancestral Recall, and the opponent kind of has to counter it. But don't forget, the other Inker Wellspring that we sacked is a trigger, and we find a core Skyfisher off the top like an absolute beast. Now if you thought the luck ended, we cast the Inker Wellspring, and then we find Makeshift Munitions. Look at this board, I have 2 Inker Wellsprings, meaning I can either kill 2 1/1s and draw 2 cards, or kill the ninja and draw 2 cards. I mean, this top deck is just insane, and swings the game back. Now you have to take note, I only have 26 cards in my library, so there is a chance that they can just burn me out of win cons and actually beat me just because I can't kill them from what's left in my deck. Now I actually make a big punt here, and they scred my core Skyfisher and I let it resolve. I should have remembered that Makeshift Munitions lets you sacrifice creatures as well as artifacts. Just the pressure got to me, and as well as, don't forget, this was at like midnight Christmas Day, so yeah, the opponent goes to attacks and we kill their ninja. Now I'm gonna fast forward because we literally just kill everything, draw go, kill everything. As you can see in my hand, 3 removal spells, and the opponent's at 12 cards, I'm at 10. This game was genuinely really boring. I just cut out the 15 minutes of draw, go, and kill. You really didn't miss anything. The opponent's just attacking me for 1, and I'm being patient to try and draw something off the top of the deck so that I can double spell with Omen of the Dead, as I worked out that they only had 1 counterspell left in their deck because we worked through all the other ones. Now the opponent draws 2 more cards with this morph creature, and I decide that if you had counterspell in hand, I really doubt that you would turn your 2/2 into a 1/3 when you're trying to pressure me, so I assumed that they didn't have the counterspell in hand, and it made sense. Core Skyfisher and Omen of the Dead has a combo because you can just keep bouncing the Omen of the Dead, getting back Core Skyfishers, and returning the Core Skyfisher from the graveyard, but the opponent just had the counterspell, obviously top decked from that Brainstorm. Now I did a ton of maths because 3 Galvanic Blasts plus Makeshift Munitions to sack all my artifacts to the face might be 19 points of damage here. So I did the maths, and I decided to sack Experimental Synthesizer to the Makeshift Munitions, and we found a Hawk, which makes it lethal. What we can do here is Galvanic Blast the face 3 times, dealing 12 damage, and sacrifice artifacts and creatures for the rest of the points. Going into boarding, the only useful card is Electrickery, so I take out 1 Relic of Progenitus and 2 Navigator's Compass because they're just not good in the matchup. Going into game 2, we have a decent hand on the draw, but if they have a quick ninjutsu hand, then maybe we can lose because our removal is very slow. The first few turns play out normally like they do in this matchup. They play a 1-drop, we play a tap land, and we ship it back. The opponent identifies they're the aggressor in this matchup, and they actually use a ninjutsu and a tap land on turn 2 to draw a card and also punish a value play on my turn 2. As we don't have any black mana and a load of black removal, I take the turn off to Cleansing Wildfire so we can fix our mana and keep cantripping. Now something really surprising happens here. The opponent plays a Fairy Seer, they scry, then they ninjutsu their ninjutsuer to draw another card, meaning that we can just untap and Suffocating Fumes and wipe this board. Like I said, what's important in this matchup is keeping the board clear, cantripping, and casting removal. And now our hand is full of cantrips, full of removal, and we have a load of mana to cast all of these spells. Now with the opponent holding up a blue and a red, it is very clear that they have a Spell Stutter Sprite in hand, so what I'm going to do is just keep casting spells where they can't Spell Stutter Sprite. Now since I have 8 cards in hand, I decide to cast a Synthesizer to bait out the Spell Stutter Sprite because we found the Electrickery to let it resolve. I'm not gonna lie, the rest of this game is just a complete bloodbath. Every turn we just draw a card, we kill their creature, we draw another card, and then they eventually just decide to give up after we cast a Deadly Dispute. What an interesting semifinals. I do believe that this is a favored matchup because again, we just have so much card advantage in the deck. Going into the finals, we start off with an interesting chat message from the opponent. They seem to rub in the fact that I got hacked, and they want me to post the L that I'm about to receive. Didn't really know what else to say, so I asked them to tell me they're subscribed. And yeah, I think it set the perfect tone for this matchup. For those who don't know, this game is going to be about for $200 to $250 of value on Magic Online and just dollar equivalent to tickets. And they start off with a Swift Sphere and Bash In, which is really bad for us because we have no life gain, and also burn game 1, we just don't have a lot of life gain. Now it's even worse for us when they make 3 1/1s and cantrip with a Rebirth because they have to sacrifice an artifact to make the 1/1s, and the artifact they sacked drew them a card. So we've just got to hope here. I fetched a basic Swamp because we do have the Suffocating Fumes in the list to try and wipe the board, but yeah, we're going to need a miracle to win this game. So in this turn I just decide to Synthesizer, trying to find a life gain spell, but we don't manage to find anything, so we just have to play the Relic and the Synthesizer and say go, and we manage to block and live at 2 life. So we do find a Synthesizer. Again, we need a cantrip for removal, Suffocating Fumes, or just a way to gain life. Not gonna lie, our deck kinda let us down here. Makes sense, burn isn't that great of a matchup game 1, and they had a very good hand. Going into boarding, we want all the life gain spells and Electrickery, and I swap them out for all the clunky removal spells that just 1 for 1 for too much mana, as don't forget they make a load of little tokens. Going into game 2 though, it starts off like a standard matchup against Burn, as we have the turn 1 tap land and they have the turn 1 Swift Sphere. I also want to say, as the opponent casts another Swift Spear, it's very difficult for me to say Swift Spear because of my accent. I always get comments on hate on the way I pronounce card names. I don't give a fuck. Swift Spheres, attack in. Now we found a land off the top, which is great, so now we can Glint Hawk, bounce the Navigator's Compass, and replay the Compass. Opponent proceeds to dump their hand onto the board, killing my Glint Hawk, and also bashing in for a lot of damage, putting me down to 11, and putting me in a very awkward spot. I decide this, it's much better I Cleansing Wildfire and bounce the Navigator's Compass next turn, because in reality playing a 2-3 that easily dies and also can't really block the Swift Sphere doesn't make a lot of sense here, and we're rewarded by top decking Galvanic Blast. Sadly, this didn't work out. They ended up having the Fire Blast to kill me. It happens sometimes. Mono red can definitely just not draw you because of the limited life gain that we have in the deck and the ways to disrupt them. But as always, if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I also want to apologize if the editing isn't up to par in this video because I actually have lost all of my editing presets from being hacked because I had to emergency reset my computer, so all of my backups got deleted and everything. So please check out this video because YouTube thinks you'll like it. I'll catch you guys in the next one.